You know, sometimes the worst people in the world are the ones who just haven't been given permission to be good yet. And I should know, because for the longest time, I was one of them. My name is Anya Thorne, and if you've ever Googled richest brat in Crestwood Heights, you probably saw my face. My father, Marcus Thorne, built the largest real estate empire this side of the Mississippi, which meant my life was less about living and more about maintaining an image of untouchable, polished perfection. I attended Blackwood Academy, where the tuition was higher than most people's mortgages, and the hallways felt less like a school and more like a runway for designer clothes and subtle acts of cruelty. I ruled those halls, and I didn't rule them with kindness, believe me. I was 18, graduating soon, and my personal record was getting 3 consecutive art history teachers to quit in a single semester. They called it burnout, but everyone knew it was the Anya effect. I was cold, I was demanding, I was a hurricane in a Chanel jacket, and the truth is, I was miserable. But misery loves company, especially when that company is terrified of you. My main target that year was Mr. Finch, the beleaguered head of the drama department, a sweet man who looked like he hadn't slept since 2008. I'd make snide remarks during class critiques, dismantle student sets for fun, and generally ensure his life was a living hell because, honestly, what else did I have to do? And then Elias Vance walked in. He wasn't a new teacher or a new student or even a new administrator. Elias was the new evening custodian. He was maybe 40, rugged-looking, with hands that clearly knew hard work and a uniform that already looked tired. I barely noticed him for the first few weeks, just another ghost pushing a cart, wiping away the glitter and privilege I left behind. What no one knew, what I certainly didn't care about, was that Elias was a single dad. He lived way out in the Maplewood district, working 2 jobs just to keep his little girl, Chloe, afloat. Chloe, who was maybe 8, was the reason for the tired kindness in his eyes, a kindness that seemed utterly out of place in Blackwood. Every night before he left, she'd ask him, "Did you see anything beautiful today, Papa?" And he always replied, "I saw you, my heart." Our first collision wasn't dramatic, it was just messy. It was a Monday right outside the auditorium. I was railing at Ms. Dubois, a poor substitute teacher, about a scheduling mix-up for my senior project, a totally self-absorbed piece about the burden of wealth, of course. I was spitting venom, my voice escalating until it cracked, and that's when I saw Elias, quietly mopping a spill a few feet away. "What are you staring at, janitor?" I snapped, using that word like a weapon. "Get back to work." "Are you enjoying the show?" He stopped the mop, looked up, and instead of flinching or bowing or getting angry, which were the only 3 responses I knew how to handle, he did something entirely different. He just gave me this slow, genuine, almost pitying smile. Not a nervous grin, but a deep, soft curve of the lips, like a man who knew a secret I didn't. Then he went back to his work, humming softly. I froze. No one, absolutely no one, had ever smiled at me without fear in their eyes. It was disorienting. It made my fury feel silly. I didn't know what to do with the lack of reaction, so I just spun on my heel and stomped off. The heat of my shame, though I wouldn't call it that yet, burning the back of my neck. The next day, my control issues flared up again. I was carrying an industrial-sized coffee mug, a stupid status symbol, and in my rush, I collided with a student near the main staircase. The mug shattered. Coffee, the expensive artisanal kind, was everywhere. The other student immediately apologized to me, terrified of my reputation. I was ready to unleash the hounds of hell on him. But before I could, Elias was there. He appeared out of nowhere with his cart. The mess was still smoking. He didn't rush. He didn't sigh in annoyance at the extra work. He just knelt, started picking up the ceramic shards, and as he was doing it, he looked up at me, not accusingly, not even with sympathy. "Just observation. It happens," he said, his voice quiet, almost a rumble. "We all drop things, Miss Thorne. That's how we learn where they belong." I just stared. He spoke to me like I was a person who had made a mistake, not a spoiled goddess who had just ruined his clean floor. He didn't treat me like my father's daughter. He treated me like I was human. It was the most unsettling, profoundly decent thing anyone had said to me in years. I didn't even say thank you. I couldn't. I just walked away, and those words, "That's how we learn where they belong," echoed in the pristine emptiness of my head all night. For the next 2 weeks, I started observing him, like an anthropologist studying a strange, gentle species. I saw him hold the door for the elderly history teacher, Dr. Sterling, who was usually ignored. I saw him fix a broken locker for a sophomore kid who clearly couldn't afford the repair fee. He was constantly giving, constantly present, and yet completely invisible to everyone else. The pivotal moment, the one that broke the dam, happened one gray afternoon behind the gym. I was sneaking out for a self-pity cigarette, my vice, my secret shame, when I saw Elias sitting on a worn-out wooden bench. He had a small, brightly colored lunchbox, and next to him was a little girl with a mess of bright blonde hair and a smile that seemed to defy the second law of thermodynamics. It was just pure, unadulterated joy. It was Chloe. They were having a picnic. 2 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches cut into triangles, and they were laughing. Not a polite titter or a sarcastic chuckle, but a real, unrestrained, glorious sound that carried on the cold wind. It was a laugh that spoke of absolute security and simple, profound love. And watching them, I suddenly realized what I had lost, what I had never truly had, that kind of easy, earned warmth. My life was filled with expensive silence. His was filled with cheap, honest laughter. I stubbed out my cigarette, my hand shaking, feeling a sharp, agonizing ache in my chest that was definitely not a nicotine craving. The opportunity for real confrontation, or connection, I guess, came during the annual Blackwood Art Gala. My senior piece was on display, a huge, tormented canvas titled "Vortex of the Unseen," all harsh blacks, grays, and deep, angry reds, a perfect visual representation of my internal state. The crowd, the usual art snobs and wealthy parents, clapped politely, murmuring vague praises about my depth and raw emotion. But I felt nothing. Just as the clapping faded, the doors burst open, and through the velvet ropes zipped little Chloe. Elias must have been working late. She had a piece of crumpled finger painting paper clutched in her hand. She marched right up to my painting, looked up at my dark, angry mess, and then looked at me, her head tilted. She held up her own picture, a riot of smeared yellow, orange, and sunshine blue. "Your painting is very, very sad," she whispered, loud enough for the silent room to hear. "It's missing the happy part." My father's face went white. The art critics froze. I felt the familiar cold pressure to yell, to ridicule this tiny disruption. But I couldn't. I just stared at her. "What is the happy part?" I asked, my voice barely a croak. She pointed to her paper. "The sun. You should add a lot of sunshine yellow, Miss Thorne. Yellow makes all the bad, dark things go away because Papa says you can't be sad if the sun is on your face." It was a perfectly innocent, perfectly true statement. And right there, in the middle of a gallery full of people who only spoke in pretentious metaphors, I felt a massive tectonic shift inside me. The pressure that had been building for 18 years finally broke. For the first time since I was a little girl, I felt a prickling heat behind my eyes. I was crying. I mean, actually, visibly crying in front of the entire Crestwood elite. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't go out. I went back to the studio, and I painted over everything. Not everything, but I started adding the yellow. I poured yellow into the grays, I mixed it with the reds, and I let the light burst out of the dark vortex. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was hopeful. And that was the turning point. Things changed quickly. I stopped tearing down the drama sets and started helping Mr. Finch build them. I apologized genuinely to Ms. Dubois. When a wealthy student tried to bully a scholarship kid, I stepped in, and for the first time, my authority was used to protect, not to hurt. The whispers started again, but this time, they were whispers of confusion and disbelief. The conflict wasn't over, though. My greatest opponent wasn't myself, but my image and my father. Marcus Thorne liked the untouchable Anya. It served his brand. The real test came a few weeks later. Elias didn't show up to work. The halls felt emptier than they should have. I found out through the principal's assistant, a woman I had terrorized for years, but who now seemed cautiously willing to talk to me. Elias had a serious kidney infection. He was hospitalized, and because of his immigration status and two low-paying jobs, he had almost no insurance. He couldn't afford the specialist care he needed. I went straight to my father's downtown tower, the place I usually only went to demand a new car or a larger allowance. I burst into his office where he was on a massive video call about acquiring some new waterfront property. "Dad," I interrupted. Without preamble, "I need you to fix something." He held up a hand to the screen. Annoyance etched deep on his face. "Anya, this is a multi-million-dollar negotiation. What is it?" "That gallery owner complained about the yellow paint?" "No," I said, leaning forward on his pristine mahogany desk. "A good man is dying in a public hospital because he can't afford medicine. He's the custodian at Blackwood. I need you to make the call. Cover his treatment, anonymously." My father just stared at me. "I don't even know who that is, Anya. I sponsor entire wings of that hospital. I don't pay for staff." "You don't know who he is," I said, my voice rising, "but he knows who I am. And he treated me better than anyone you've ever paid to tutor me, or guard me, or befriend me. You taught me that money means power, Dad. Use that power for something decent for once." The shock on his face was cinematic. He saw not the demanding girl who wanted a trip to Milan, but a young woman fighting for someone else's life. He saw the flicker of the compassion my mother had when she was alive. He ended the call right there. "His name," my father finally said, pulling a notebook. "Give me the details." Elias received the anonymous full treatment. He returned to work weeks later, weaker but glowing. And the first thing he saw was the custodian's storage room I had taken over. I had painted the whole wall, not just a stripe, a bright, deep, sunny yellow. And above the supply shelf, I had carefully painted a quote, taken directly from his daughter's wisdom. "Yellow makes all the bad, dark things go away." He just smiled that slow, knowing smile. He didn't have to ask who did it. We had our language now, and here's where the story gets real. I didn't stop there. I started volunteering at Chloe's community center. I used my father's name and network to quietly secure funding for a free health clinic in the Maplewood district. I started studying urban planning, not art history. I changed my entire senior project to focus on affordable housing initiatives. One afternoon, sitting on that wooden bench behind the gym, Chloe leaned against me while waiting for her dad. I braided her bright blonde hair and I realized I had found the beauty Elias talked about. "Your dad changed my life." "Sweet pea," I whispered to her. She just giggled. "He says that's good." "Miss Anya, he says that the only kind of power that truly lasts is the kind you give away. And that truly is the secret. I didn't handle me. Elias didn't fix me. He just gave me a mirror that wasn't covered in money and anger. He showed me that I was allowed to be kind, that kindness wasn't a weakness. It was the highest form of control, because it controlled my own heart. But here's the controversial ending, the part that only a few people in Crestwood saw. My father, Marcus Thorne, watched me become compassionate, watched me start tearing down his carefully constructed image, and he was proud, yes, but he was also terrified. Because my new focus on housing justice directly conflicted with his new billion-dollar waterfront development project that was set to displace hundreds of working-class families in Maplewood, Elias, Vance, and Chloe among them. The final conversation I had with my father before I left for college wasn't about grades or a graduation party. It was a vicious fight. He told me to stay in my lane. I told him I wouldn't stop until those families were safe. I told him he had created a monster, and that monster was now going to dismantle his empire, one compassionate, yellow-painted wall at a time. I changed. I became good. But becoming good put me on a collision course with the very man whose wealth I was using. And the fight for justice? That was a fight against the man who paid for my kindness. What do you think? Did Elias Vance's simple kindness ultimately do more harm than good by placing me on a path where I had to choose between my family and my conscience? Was my newfound fight for justice a moral obligation? Or was it just another way for the billionaire's daughter to exercise control, just on a grander, more destructive scale? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories about the hidden cost of changing your life.